The gleaming conference room on the 42nd floor of Sterling Tech Industries buzzed with nervous energy as CEO Jennifer Sterling prepared for the most important board meeting of her career. At 38, she had built her cybersecurity company from a garage startup into a $3 billion empire. But today's vote would determine whether she retained control of the company she'd spent 15 years creating. The hostile takeover bid from Meridian Corporate had been unexpected and aggressive, offering shareholders a premium that made resistance nearly impossible. Jennifer's only hope lay in a last-minute deal with her longtime business partner and closest friend, David Chen, whose investment firm controlled 22% of Sterling Tech's shares. With David's support, she could maintain control. Without it, she would lose everything. "The vote is scheduled for 3 o'clock, Jennifer said to her reflection in the conference room's floor-to-ceiling windows, her voice betraying none of the anxiety that churned in her stomach. Outside, Manhattan stretched endlessly in all directions, a concrete reminder of how far she'd climbed and how far she had to fall. David Chen had been Jennifer's business partner since their Stanford MBA days, when they developed the encryption algorithms that became the foundation of Sterling Tech's success. More than a business associate, he'd been her confidant through her divorce, her support during her mother's battle with cancer, and her closest friend during the lonely years of building a company that consumed every waking moment. Their relationship had always been built on absolute trust. David knew her business strategies before she implemented them, understood her personal fears before she acknowledged them, and held power over her company's future that she'd never questioned. If anyone could help her survive the takeover attempt, it would be David. But what Jennifer didn't know was that David Chen had been orchestrating the hostile takeover from the beginning. 3 floors below, in the executive kitchen that served the company's senior management, Elif Yilmaz quietly prepared the coffee service for the afternoon board meeting. At 45, she had worked as the executive floor's kitchen supervisor for 18 months, arriving each morning before dawn to ensure that Sterling Tech's leadership had everything they needed for their high-stakes meetings. Elif moved through the gleaming kitchen with practiced efficiency, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, her movements economical and precise. To most of the executives who passed through the kitchen, she was virtually invisible, another uniformed employee who appeared when needed and disappeared when her services were no longer required. But Elif possessed qualities that made her far more observant than her employers realized. She had immigrated to New York from Istanbul 12 years earlier, bringing with her a master's degree in economics from Bogazici University and fluency in 4 languages. Financial necessity had led her to domestic work, but her education and intelligence made her acutely aware of the business conversations that swirled around her as she served meals and refreshments. More importantly, Elif had developed a deep respect for Jennifer Sterling, one of the few executives who consistently treated the support staff with genuine courtesy and consideration. Jennifer remembered the names of Elif's children, asked about her family in Turkey, and had quietly arranged for tuition assistance when Elif's eldest daughter had been accepted to NYU. As Elif prepared the elaborate coffee service for the board meeting, she couldn't shake the uneasiness that had been building for weeks. Something about David Chen's recent behavior had triggered her instincts, subtle changes in his demeanor that reminded her of the corrupt businessman she'd observed in Istanbul, who smiled while plotting betrayal. The executive floor had been buzzing with tension for days as news of the takeover attempt spread through the company. Elif had overheard fragments of conversations about share prices, voting blocks, and emergency strategies. But it was David's phone conversations that had caught her attention, calls he'd made in what he assumed was the privacy of his office while Elif cleaned the adjacent conference room. 3 days earlier, while polishing the mahogany table in Conference Room B, Elif had heard David speaking in hushed tones on his cell phone, discussing timing and final coordination with someone he addressed as Marcus. The conversation had been brief but intense, and something in David's tone had made her pause in her cleaning to listen more carefully. "Everything is proceeding as planned," David had said. "Jennifer trusts me completely. She has no idea what's coming, and by the time she realizes what's happening, it will be too late to stop it." Quote, the words had sent a chill through Elif's heart. She understood enough about corporate politics to recognize the language of betrayal, but she'd initially dismissed her concerns as misunderstanding or paranoia. David Chen was Jennifer's oldest friend and most trusted advisor. Surely she'd misheard or misinterpreted his conversation. But over the following days, Elif had noticed other troubling signs. David's meetings with unusual visitors who didn't appear on the executive calendar. His requests for specific financial reports that seemed unrelated to his normal responsibilities. And most tellingly, his behavior around Jennifer herself. The forced cheerfulness that masked something darker underneath. The revelation had come that morning, when Elif arrived early to prepare breakfast for an emergency strategy session. As she'd entered the kitchen, she'd heard voices from David's office, where he was having what he clearly believed was a private conversation with someone via video call. "Marcus, the vote is this afternoon," David had been saying, his voice carrying clearly through the thin walls. "I've convinced Jennifer that I'm supporting her, so she won't be prepared for what's coming. My shares, combined with the blocks we've secured, will give us controlling interest in Sterling Tech. By tonight, Jennifer Sterling will be out, and we'll own one of the most valuable cybersecurity companies in the world." The caller's response had been muffled, but David's reply was crystal clear. "She built an incredible company, I'll give her that, but she's always been too trusting, too naive about business realities. She actually believes I'm her friend. After 15 years of partnership, she has no idea I've been planning this takeover for months." Elif had stood frozen in the kitchen, her hands gripping the coffee pot as the full scope of David's betrayal became clear. He wasn't just voting against Jennifer. He was the architect of the entire hostile takeover, using his intimate knowledge of her business and his position as her trusted partner to destroy everything she'd built. Now, as Elif prepared the coffee service for what would likely be Jennifer's final board meeting as CEO, she faced an agonizing dilemma. She possessed information that could save Jennifer's career and company, but revealing it would mean exposing herself to potential retaliation and job loss. As an immigrant working in domestic services, she had no power, no influence, and no guarantee that anyone would believe her accusations against one of the most respected figures in Silicon Valley. But as she arranged the delicate china cups and saucers on the sterling silver tray, Elif thought about Jennifer's kindness to her family, her genuine respect for people regardless of their position, and her obvious love for the company she'd built from nothing. Some betrayals were too cruel to ignore, regardless of the personal cost of speaking up. At 2:45 p.m., Elif wheeled the coffee service into the boardroom where Jennifer sat alone, reviewing her final notes before the meeting that would determine her fate. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, highlighting the tension in Jennifer's shoulders and the worry lines around her eyes. "Your coffee, Miss Sterling," Elif said quietly, beginning to arrange the cups around the mahogany table where the board members would soon decide the company's future. "Thank you, Elif," Jennifer replied with a tired smile. "I don't know what we'd do without you keeping us caffeinated during these stressful times." As Elif poured Jennifer's coffee, she noticed David Chen approaching the boardroom, his confident stride and easy smile masking the betrayal he was about to execute. In 5 minutes, the other board members would arrive, and Jennifer would walk into the meeting completely unprepared for the devastation awaiting her. Elif's heart pounded as she made the most important decision of her professional life. Moving closer to Jennifer, she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper, using her native Turkish to ensure that David, who had just entered the room, couldn't understand her words. "Ona güvenme," Elif said softly, her eyes meeting Jennifer's with urgent intensity. "He's planning to betray you. David is behind the takeover. Don't trust him." Jennifer looked up sharply, not understanding the Turkish words but recognizing the gravity in Elif's tone and expression. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" David had taken a seat at the far end of the table and was casually reviewing his notes, apparently unaware of the whispered conversation taking place near the coffee service. Elif glanced toward him, then back at Jennifer, her voice remaining low and urgent. "David Chen," Elif whispered in English, "he is not your friend. He is working with the people trying to take your company. I heard him on the phone this morning. He said you trust him too much, that you don't know he's been planning this for months." Jennifer's face went pale as the implications of Elif's warning hit her like a physical blow. "That's impossible. David has been my partner for 15 years. He's my closest friend." "Ms. Sterling," Elif said, her voice filled with the quiet authority of someone risking everything to tell the truth. "I heard him say that your shares plus the blocks they have secured will give them control of Sterling Tech. He said that by tonight, you will be out and they will own your company." The boardroom door opened as the first directors began arriving for the meeting, their grave expressions reflecting the significance of the vote about to take place. David looked up from his papers and smiled warmly at Jennifer, his performance of friendship so convincing that she might have dismissed Elif's warning entirely, if not for the Turkish woman's obvious sincerity and detailed knowledge of the takeover strategy. "Jennifer," David called out cheerfully, "are you ready for this? Don't worry, we're going to send Meridian Corporate packing this afternoon. Jennifer studied David's face carefully, looking for signs of the deception Elif had described. His expression was open and supportive, his body language relaxed and confident. If Elif was right, David Chen was not just a traitor but a masterful actor who had been manipulating her for months. "Elif," Jennifer whispered as the kitchen supervisor continued arranging the coffee service. "Are you absolutely certain about what you heard?" "Yes, Miss Sterling," Elif replied firmly. "He was talking to someone named Marcus. He said you built an incredible company, but that you're too trusting, too naive about business realities. He said you have no idea he's been planning this takeover for months." Marcus. Jennifer's blood ran cold as she recognized the name. Marcus Webb was the CEO of Meridian Corporate, the company attempting the hostile takeover. If David was coordinating with Marcus, then Elif's warning was not just credible. It was devastating proof of a betrayal so complete that it threatened everything Jennifer had ever believed about friendship and trust. As more board members filed into the room, Jennifer's mind raced through the implications of David's treachery. His investment firm's 22% stake in Sterling Tech, combined with shares he'd apparently secured from other investors, would indeed give him and his co-conspirators controlling interest in her company. She'd been walking into an ambush disguised as a rescue. "David," Jennifer said, her voice carefully neutral, "could you give me a moment? I need to make a quick call before we begin." "Of course," David replied, checking his watch. "We have a few minutes before everyone arrives." Jennifer stepped into her private office adjacent to the boardroom, pulling out her phone with trembling hands. If Elif was right about David's conspiracy, she needed to confirm the details before confronting him publicly. She dialed the number for Marcus Webb's office, knowing that Meridian's CEO would be monitoring the situation closely as the vote approached. "Marcus Webb's office," his assistant answered. "This is Jennifer Sterling," she said, affecting a tone of defeat and resignation. "Could you tell Mr. Webb that I'm prepared to discuss terms for a negotiated surrender? I realize that fighting the inevitable is pointless, and I'd like to explore options for a graceful transition." The assistant put her on hold immediately, and within seconds Marcus Webb's voice came through the line with barely concealed triumph. "Jennifer, I have to say I'm surprised but pleased by your call. I know this can't be easy for you." "It's not," Jennifer replied, playing her role carefully. "But I'm a realist, Marcus. David Chen has made it clear that he's supporting the takeover, and without his shares, I don't have the votes to maintain control." Marcus's response confirmed Elif's warning with devastating clarity. "Well, David has been very helpful throughout this process. I have to give him credit. His insights into your company's vulnerabilities and his ability to coordinate the timing have been invaluable. You should be proud of what you built, Jennifer, even if you won't be running it much longer." Jennifer ended the call with her hands shaking, the full scope of David's betrayal now undeniably confirmed. Her oldest friend and most trusted partner had been working with her enemies for months, using his intimate knowledge of her business and his position of trust to orchestrate her downfall. Returning to the boardroom, Jennifer found all the directors assembled and waiting for her leadership in what they believed would be a desperate fight for the company's independence. David sat at his usual place, his expression concerned and supportive, ready to deliver the killing blow while wearing the mask of friendship. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jennifer began, her voice steady despite the emotional turmoil raging inside her. "Before we proceed with today's vote, I've learned some information that changes our situation significantly." She looked directly at David, watching his expression carefully as she continued. "I've discovered that someone with intimate knowledge of our company has been working with Meridian Corporate to coordinate this takeover attempt, providing them with strategic information and helping them secure the voting blocks necessary to gain control of Sterling Tech." David's face remained perfectly composed, but Jennifer caught a flicker of concern in his eyes. "That's terrible, Jennifer. Do we know who the leak is?" "As a matter of fact, we do," Jennifer replied, her voice growing stronger with each word. "The person coordinating with Marcus Webb, sharing our confidential information and manipulating our board composition is someone who's been planning this betrayal for months while pretending to be our ally." The boardroom fell silent as directors looked around the table, trying to identify the traitor among them. David leaned forward with what appeared to be genuine concern, his performance of innocence so convincing that several board members nodded approvingly at his apparent loyalty. "David," Jennifer said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade, "would you like to tell the board about your phone conversations with Marcus Webb, or shall I?" The color drained from David's face as he realized his deception had been exposed. For a moment, his mask of friendship slipped completely, revealing the calculating opportunist underneath. Then he recovered, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow in the tense boardroom. "Jennifer, I think the stress of this situation is affecting your judgment. I've been your partner and friend for 15 years. I would never." "You told Marcus Webb that I'm too trusting and naive about business realities," Jennifer interrupted, her voice filled with quiet fury. "You said I had no idea you'd been planning this takeover for months. You described me as someone who built an incredible company, but was foolish enough to believe you were actually my friend." Quote. David's composure cracked completely as he realized the specificity of her knowledge meant someone had overheard his private conversations. "Jennifer, you don't understand the full picture. This isn't personal, it's business. Sterling Tech has incredible potential, but it needs different leadership to reach the next level." "Different leadership meaning you and Marcus Webb," Jennifer said coldly. "Leadership that was willing to destroy 15 years of partnership and friendship for money and power." She turned to address the other board members, her voice carrying the authority of someone who just discovered her own strength. "David Chen's investment firm controls 22% of our shares, which he's been coordinating with Meridian Corporate to ensure their takeover succeeds. With his support, they would gain controlling interest in Sterling Tech. Without it, they fail completely." The board erupted in angry voices, as directors realized they'd been manipulated by someone they'd trusted implicitly. David sat in stunned silence, his carefully constructed plan falling apart as Jennifer systematically exposed his betrayal. "The question now," Jennifer continued, "is whether we allow this conspiracy to succeed, or whether we stand together to protect the company we've all worked to build." The vote was unanimous. Every board member, except David, voted to reject the Meridian corporate takeover and implement new governance structures that would prevent similar betrayals in the future. David's shares were immediately diluted through an emergency stock issuance, and his position on the board was terminated effective immediately. As security escorted David from the building, Jennifer found herself alone in the boardroom with Elif, who had quietly remained to clean up after the meeting. The Turkish woman moved efficiently around the table, collecting coffee cups, and wiping down surfaces as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. "Elif," Jennifer said softly, "you saved my company today. If you hadn't warned me about David's betrayal, I would have lost everything I've spent 15 years building." Elif paused in her work, her weathered hand still holding a coffee cup as she met Jennifer's eyes. "Miss Sterling, some things are more important than job security. You've always treated me and my family with kindness and respect. When I saw that someone was planning to hurt you, I could not stay silent." Quote. "But you risked everything by speaking up," Jennifer said. "You could have lost your job, faced retaliation, been dismissed as unreliable. Why would you take such a chance for someone who's essentially your employer?" Elif smiled with quiet dignity, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who'd seen betrayal and loyalty in many forms. "Because loyalty is not about position or power, Miss Sterling. It's about recognizing good people and protecting them when they're in danger. You are a good person who treats others well. That matters more than money or security." Jennifer felt tears building in her eyes as she realized the profound gift Elif had given her. "Your warning didn't just save my company, it probably saved my life. I trusted David completely. I would never have seen his betrayal coming." "Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who can hurt us most," Elif replied thoughtfully. "But sometimes the people we barely notice are the ones who save us. Today, I was able to help you because I saw what others missed." Over the following weeks, Jennifer restructured Sterling Tech's leadership and governance to prevent future betrayals while implementing new policies that recognized and rewarded employee loyalty across all levels of the organization. She created an employee advisory board that included representatives from every department, ensuring that the insights of people like Elif would never again be overlooked. Elif was promoted to Executive Services Director, with responsibilities that utilized her economics background and multilingual skills in coordinating Sterling Tech's expanding international operations. Her children received full scholarship support for their education, and her family was provided with the security and respect they'd long deserved. David Chen's betrayal became a cautionary tale in Silicon Valley business circles, a reminder that trust without verification could destroy even the strongest partnerships. His reputation never recovered from the scandal, and his investment firm collapsed within 6 months as clients fled to more trustworthy alternatives. But the most lasting change was in Jennifer herself, who learned to distinguish between the loyalty of position and the loyalty of character. She discovered that wisdom and protection often came from the most unexpected sources, and that the people closest to power weren't always the ones most worthy of trust. 3 months after the failed takeover, Jennifer sat in her office reviewing reports from Sterling Tech's international expansion, a growth strategy that had been accelerated by Elif's cultural insights and language skills. Through her window, she could see the bustling streets of Manhattan, where millions of people worked in positions that didn't reflect their full potential or value. Elif knocked on her door, carrying the afternoon coffee service that had become a symbol of their transformed relationship. But now she also carried market analysis reports and cultural assessments that were helping Sterling Tech succeed in global markets that David's narrow perspective had never considered. "Your coffee, Miss Sterling," Elif said with a smile, setting down a cup that represented far more than refreshment. It symbolized the moment when quiet courage had spoken truth to power. "Thank you, Elif," Jennifer replied, accepting the coffee and the friendship that had grown from that crucial warning whispered in Turkish. "For everything." As they reviewed the international expansion reports together, Jennifer reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. The maid who spoke softly in Turkish had indeed helped her understand not just David's betrayal, but the true nature of loyalty, the value of diverse perspectives, and the reality that wisdom often comes from the most humble sources. The warning, "Don't trust him," had saved more than a company. It had revealed the difference between those who sought to exploit trust and those who sought to protect it. In the end, the person with the least power had wielded the most important influence, proving that courage and character matter more than position or privilege. Jennifer Sterling finally understood that the most valuable voices aren't always the loudest ones, and that sometimes the most important truths are whispered by those the world has taught us to overlook. The Turkish maid's soft warning had changed everything, demonstrating that real strength often speaks quietly but acts decisively when justice and loyalty demand it. 1 year later, Jennifer Sterling stood before an audience of business leaders at the Global Leadership Summit, with Elif Yilmaz beside her as co-keynote speaker. The woman who had once served coffee in silence now addressed the crowd as Sterling Tech's Vice President of International Relations, her insights having helped the company expand into 12 new countries. "The greatest leaders," Jennifer told the audience, "are not always those with the most impressive titles or the largest offices. Sometimes they're the people who have the courage to speak truth when it matters most, regardless of the personal cost." She turned to Elif, whose quiet dignity had transformed not just one company, but an entire approach to recognizing value in unexpected places. "A year ago, 3 words whispered in Turkish, 'Don't trust him,' saved my company from destruction. But more importantly, they taught me that wisdom often comes from those we're conditioned to overlook." Elif smiled, remembering that tense afternoon when she'd risked everything to protect someone who had shown her basic human kindness. "Sometimes the most important conversations happen in whispers," she said to the captivated audience. "And sometimes the people with the least power have the most crucial information." As they concluded their presentation to thunderous applause, Jennifer reflected on how profoundly her life had changed. David Chin's calculated betrayal had been thwarted by an immigrant kitchen supervisor's moral courage, proving that loyalty isn't about contracts or profit margins. It's about character. The maid had spoken softly in Turkish, and the CEO had finally understood that the most valuable truths often come from the most humble messengers. In saving Jennifer's company, Elif had taught the business world a lesson worth billions. Never underestimate the power of quiet courage, and always listen when integrity finds its voice. Sometimes the greatest victories begin with the smallest whispers, and sometimes the most important person in the room is the one everyone else has forgotten to see.